Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 377 of the Prancing Pony podcast, where our keeping of dates and calculations of time were also vague and inaccurate.
Until we settled down in the Westlands and adopted the King's Reckoning, of course.
Of course.
Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm James Tauber, the Sage of the South, and I'm here with the man of the West who is older than me in any calendar system, Alan Sisto.
Knew something like that was coming. Get off my lawn, James. Folks, join us as we challenge ourselves to record an episode on the calendars in Appendix D that is at least as exciting as our episode on the map chapter in the Silmarillion.
Hey, don't knock off Beleriand and its realms. Best chapter ever.
It's a great one, I will admit.
Folks, no matter how you arrived, you're all welcome here in the common room. At the Prancing Pony podcast, we're reading and talking our way through Middle-earth, with plenty of speculation and bad jokes along the way.
And we do love our deep dives into the lore, discussing our favorite themes, and a whole lot more.
But we try to keep it light and fun, like a couple of friends chatting at the pub, and we're glad you've joined us.
Do you know any friends who you'd spend 2 hours chatting with about calendars at the pub?
I would be that friend to many people.
You would be. Sure. I think so. This is a wonderfully... I mean, I'm just going to say this. This is a pedantic episode in the best possible way.
I'm glad you added in the best possible way, because I was worried that immediate jump to pedantry. No,
not at all. Anyway, folks, I'm sure you're going to be glad you joined as well. But before we get to tonight's appendix discussion, it's time to take a look at a new kingly gift that has just arrived on our shelves. James?
Yes, so to mark the centenary of Christopher Tolkien's birth last year, HarperCollins has published the Saga of King Hedric the Wise, together with the Battle of the Goths and the Huns. Now, these are two scholarly works that Christopher Tolkien wrote in the 1950s.
Now, you can go to the website for the Viking Society for Northern Research, I know it's on my bookmarks list, and download separate PDFs of these for free. But for those wanting a physical copy, this HarperCollins paperback issue is now available. It hasn't been reset or anything. It's literally just a reproduction of the original texts.
Before we say a little something about the two texts, it's worth saying a little something about Christopher's biography. Mm-hmm. Many listeners will be aware of his World War II service, his involvement in the writing of Lord of the Rings, and then, of course, his work as literary executor after his father's death. But we don't talk much about what happened in between. Christopher's military service during the Second World War interrupted his studies at Oxford, but he did return after the war to complete his BA in English in 1948. Going on to do a B.Lit in 1953, where he worked with the Old Norse philologist Gabriel Turville Petra, who had himself studied with J.R.R. Tolkien.
Now, in that same year, which was 1953, Christopher wrote an essay entitled The Battle of the Goths and the Huns. In the opening to the essay, Christopher explains that the conclusion of the Hedric saga, also known as the Hervarar saga, and which we'll get to shortly, is, quote, contrived from a poem, or rather the ruins of a poem, now commonly called in English The Battle of the Goths and the Huns, in which is told in moving, though much damaged verse, interspersed with prose links, how Hlothr, the bastard son of King Hedrekar of Rhaethgotaland, and I'll just note, by the way, that Christopher got to write these words and didn't have to pronounce them, but I'm sure he would have pronounced them perfectly, by a mistress named Sifka, who he had taken from the people of the Huns, set in movement a monstrous war against his half-brother Angantyr for the recovery of his portion of the Gothic inheritance. And Christopher then goes on to say that the poem is commonly referred to as one of the oldest, if not the very oldest, pieces of heroic poetry in the Norse language.
But what concerns Christopher in the essay is not so much its age, but whether the events underlying it occurred in real life. Or more specifically, what was the relationship between what is described and possible events that may have happened, as well as the relationship with other accounts in other texts. While alterations were considerable over time, Christopher argues that the poem may have been part of a larger narrative of the Goth-Hun conflict.
And that would be interesting if you've got a bastard son of the king who's half Gothic, but also half Hun. Mm-hmm. And then he's after his half of the Gothic inheritance against his 100% Gothic brother, but he's half Hun. I mean, this is like TV miniseries stuff right here. I love it. Absolutely love it. Though, of course, they probably have to come up with more pronounceable names because I don't think anybody's going to be sitting around the water cooler, not that that's anything more than a proverb anymore, with names like Hlothr and Heidrechar.
So one of the interesting things about this and the overall saga is the names have not in any way been Latinized.
No.
So many of the texts we have now, things corresponding to similar stories, have variations in the names that are influenced by Latin. That's not the case here at all, which is one of the reasons why we suspect it's so old. Because
that's fascinating.
It's got the original Gothic names for a lot of these characters.
Oh, I love that. Well, so Christopher Tolkien went on to take a position as a lecturer at St. Catherine's at Oxford. And in 1960, he published his own edition and translation of the Heidrech saga as part of the Nelson's Icelandic Text Series. Now, I know that's something that fills all of your shelves, Nelson's Icelandic Text Series. Everybody knows it. Everybody has a copy. Seriously, though, folks, if you've ever looked at scholarly editions of classical or medieval texts, this is fairly standard fare, right? You've got the lengthy introduction that includes a background and a discussion of the manuscripts from which Christopher has constructed his edition. The main portion of the edition consists of the constructed Icelandic text of the Heidrech saga on the left-hand pages and Christopher's translation into English on the right. And then the footnotes focus primarily on the different readings between the manuscripts.
The main text is then followed by a series of appendices on various topics, a glossary of technical terms, and an index of people and places. It's not dissimilar to much of the history of Middle-earth.
No, you're right, it isn't.
I definitely found a real cognitive dissonance in reading Christopher talking about different manuscripts and name changes and the relationship between different versions of the story, but never using the phrase, my father, like he does so often in the history of Middle-earth.
That's a good point. You're right, because his voice is so very distinctive that you almost expect to read him saying, my father,
exactly,
because you're so used to that from history of
Middle-earth. And it's not there at all, because he's talking about...
Because it's a totally different story.
He's talking about them in the same way, though, and it sort of says a lot about how scholarly Christopher's approach in the history of Middle-earth was, but also how appropriate it is to approach Tolkien's works with that kind of scholarly care.
With that same level of scholarly care, thoroughness, and it really also speaks to how that's an approach that he's developed professionally long before he became the literary executor.
Exactly.
Because if we're talking about something that was published in 1960, 13 years before his father died, and 17 years before any of his father's works were published posthumously. Yeah. Fascinating. Well, quite apart from Christopher's own work on producing this edition, it is noticeable for its influence on his father's works. It deals with a cursed sword forged by dwarfs. I have to say dwarfs because that's what they are in the story, rather than dwarves, which they should be, or dwarros, called Dvalin and Durin. And at one point, the sword is buried in a barrow, but is then retrieved by a shield maiden whose son is the eponymous Heidrechar. And Heidrechar himself ends up being killed in a riddle contest, of all things. There's even a Myrkvidr, or Mirkwood.
It's quite remarkable how much Tolkien drew on this.
We get a few of the bones of the soup, as it were.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's great because, we see when we see that he's taken this from this and he's taken this from this, but he's changed this and he's changed that. And then he's taken this from something else and he's taken this from something else. And you see all these sources of inspiration that go into it, how anybody can say he was just aping one or two things.
Right.
You're clearly not looking at the whole scope of the work.
Yeah.
Because he pulled inspiration from, dozens of sources.
Yeah.
It really is fascinating.
So it's really fun to read an edition of these texts that were an influence on Tolkien, prepared by his son.
Exactly. I think it provides a lot of insight there. And it does feel very personal too. It's just another chance to get insight into Christopher and his work and his passion.
Exactly. And as we mentioned, these texts have been available freely for some time, but it's nice to have them in paperback. And I think it's a really appropriate commemoration for the centenary.
And because it's a paperback, it's super affordable. I mean, I don't think there are any plans for it to be published by the U.S. publisher.
Right.
It is a HarperCollins only. I don't think there's a William Morrow imprint, so you do have to get it from a UK source. So I think my shipping was actually more than the book.
Probably, yes.
But it was still very, very affordable. So pick that up if you're interested at all in Old Norse, if you're interested in Christopher and his studies of manuscripts and, kind of seeing the way that he worked in history of Middle-earth. But we're going to go ahead and move on into our discussion of the calendars. We're going to jump right in to the Shire calendar. James, would you pick up with the beginning of Appendix D?
Every year began on the first day of the week, Saturday, and ended on the last day of the week, Friday. The mid-year's day, and in leap years, the overlithe, had no weekday name. The lithe before mid-year's day was called one lithe, and the one after was called two lithe. The Yule at the end of the year was one Yule, and at the beginning was two Yule. The overlithe was a day of special holiday, but it did not occur in any of the years important to the history of the Great Ring. It occurred in 1420, the year of the famous harvest and wonderful summer, and the merrymaking in that year is said to have been the greatest in memory or record. The calendars. The calendar in the Shire differed in several features from ours. The year no doubt was of the same length, for long ago, as those times are now reckoned in years and lives of men, they were not very remote according to the memory of earth. It is recorded by the Hobbits that they had no week when they were still a wandering people. And though they had months, governed more or less by the moon, their keeping of dates and calculations of time were vague and inaccurate. In the Westlands of Eriador, when they had begun to settle down, they adopted the king's reckoning of the Dunedain, which was ultimately of Eldarin origin. But the Hobbits of the Shire introduced several minor alterations. This calendar, or Shire reckoning as it was called, was eventually adopted also in Bree, except for the Shire usage of counting as year one, the year of the colonisation of the Shire. It is often difficult to discover from old tales and traditions precise information about things which people knew well and took for granted in their own day, such as the names of letters or of the days of the week, or the names and lengths of months. But owing to their general interest in genealogy, and to the interest in ancient history, which the learned among them developed after the War of the Ring, the Shire Hobbits seem to have concerned themselves a good deal with dates, and they even drew up complicated tables showing the relations of their own system with others. I am not skilled in these matters and may have made many errors, but at any rate the chronology of the crucial years, Shire reckoning 1418, 1419, is so carefully set out in the Red Book that there cannot be much doubt about days and times at that point.
Oh, man. We're going to get to that, but I love that last paragraph. It's basically a long aside from Tolkien himself.
Yes.
I mean, it's such a great insight into this whole frame narrative and the whole idea of he's discovered this and he's translating these things. It's really cool. But let's go back to this just in general. I got to ask you this question, and folks, I'm curious. I actually literally want to hear from you all. Send in your answers to the mailbag. How many times did you read The Lord of the Rings before you decided to actually read Appendix D and look at these calendar details?
I don't even remember in my case.
I know I didn't look. I didn't look the first time. I don't think. I mean, I glanced and I was like, "Well, this is over my head," or "I'm not interested." I know I read Appendix A because there was story material in there, right? The tale of Aragorn and Arwen and all the stuff about the House of Eorl and Durin and all of this. But the calendars and the languages and the writing and spelling, I don't know if I really got into those until
I just went straight to Appendix D.
I was going to say, I bet you did.
I saw that Tengwar and I thought, this is for me. Yeah.
I was very fascinated by it, but I was also a little bit intimidated by it. Mm-hmm. And the calendars, it was the same sort of thing. Like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I'm just, let me enjoy the story. Yeah. So there's a part of me that understands, certainly listeners, those of you checking in the show, maybe you've never looked at this in depth before. We hope that this will give you a chance to do that.
Yeah. It's one of those bits of detail that for some it's easily skipped. It doesn't necessarily add anything of substance to the narrative.
No.
But like all the other systems that Tolkien built, like the languages, of course, studying this reveals, again, the level of incredible detail and effort that the professor poured into the subcreation of Middle-earth. That's
exactly why we're doing this, folks. I mean, we think that you're going to find this interesting enough to justify an entire episode of the PPP. I got to tell you, I found it a lot more interesting than I thought I would in putting it together. Like, that's interesting. Oh, that's unique. Well, look at that, So break out your calendars and do your best to follow along. The appendix starts with the Shire calendar, as one might expect, right? I mean, the story, even though it features elves and men and dwarves, it is a Hobbit-centric story.
Indeed. And you noted something similar back during your discussion of the Tale of Aragorn and Arwen with Sarah Brown. You noted Tolkien writing in letter 181 that the reason he put it in an appendix was, quote, because it could not be worked into the main narrative without destroying its structure. It's Hobbit-centered structure, in other words.
Absolutely. The story is focused on the experience of the Hobbits. So, of course, the first calendar system explained is the Shire calendar, even though, as we'll soon see, it was based in turn on the Númenórean system, which he says was also Eldorad in nature, but I think we'll see it's a pretty big change.
Yes, indeed. And while we'll look at each system in turn, there are a lot of connections that we need to point out as we're going through them.
That is true. Yeah.
Not to mention several references to the drafts of Appendix D that Christopher Tolkien gives us in Peoples. Part 1, Chapter 4, covering this appendix.
That's right. So let's go ahead and dive first into the Shire calendar. I love it because it's remarkably elegant in its simplicity. You have 12 equal months of 30 days each. And the extra 5 days that are needed are divided between a 3-day period at mid-year and a 2-day period at Yule. Nice and easy. Yeah.
Yep. Nice and easy. Of course, a leap day every 4 years, except every 100, just like ours. And that was an extra midday year, basically.
Yeah.
So you had 2 Yule starting the year on a Saturday, as we read before, and 1 Yule ending the year on a Friday. Then at the end of the 6-month period, 1 Lithe was on a Friday, followed by Mid-Year's Day, which didn't have a weekday name, and then 2 Lithe on a Saturday.
Now, that part, I admit, is the hardest part for me to wrap my head around. A day that doesn't have a weekday name. So you're on a Friday, right? You're on 1 Lithe, and you say tomorrow, meaning Saturday, but on 1 Lithe, it would mean the unnamed Mid-Year's Day, not actually Saturday, which is 2 days later. And of course, that gets even wilder in leap years because there would be a second Mid-Year's Day called Overlithe that would also not have a weekday name. So when I say tomorrow on 1 Lithe, do I mean Mid-Year's Day or do I mean Saturday 2 Lithe? Right? That's
yeah.
I mean, I guess you just say Saturday if you mean the next actual day.
The actual, well, the next actual
the next named day.
Named day, yeah. But of course, you need to do that. Otherwise, if you want to retain that consistency of the day of the day of the week that it is at the start of the year.
Oh, yeah. And we'll get to that, especially as we get further into the explanations. Yeah.
So note that Overlithe and so on was a special holiday, right? Unlike February 29th, which just confuses most of us.
It does, doesn't it?
That didn't impact the story because, as we already read, it didn't take place in any of the important years until, of course, the famous 1420.
I do kind of like the idea, by the way, of making that leap day an actual holiday. You know, just let's not stick it in at a random month. Let's make it a day in the middle of the year and party, you know. But I will say that there's a certain elegance in this weird skip the weekday name for the Mid-Year's Day, because what that meant was that every month was exactly the same, regardless of what year you were in. I mean, Solmouth 9 was always a Tuesday or a Truesday, as the case may be. We'll get to the names of the months and days later. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember noticing in the Tale of Years that there are certain events that happen, for example, on February the 30th as well. So the Interlude, for example, takes place on February 30th. And
days that don't happen in our calendar.
Exactly. But yeah, so, you know, as we've been discussing, if your birthday was on a Thursday, it's always on a Thursday.
And it's also nice because Yule always took place on a Friday and Saturday, just like Lithe would take place on a Friday, Saturday.
And, you know, every month, as I said, was 30 days long.
Perfect.
So why don't we adopt this system?
I know. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, can we please start a movement to adopt the Shire calendar worldwide? Everybody gets holidays in the middle. The nice thing about having the Mid-Year's Day and the Lithe and then the Yule is that because they're exactly opposite each other in the calendars, even the Southern Hemisphere still gets to celebrate in the same way with the same sort of weather, you know, like, I mean, sure, the Southern Hemisphere's Lithe is going to be wintry and is going to be wintry and their Yule will be summery, but at least they get a celebration in the middle of the year and they're separated by 6 months. I love the idea.
So there is a notion in Australia of Christmas in July. It's often referred to as, to take advantage of the thing. But we wouldn't need to do that in a Shire calendar because we've got to.
Because you'd have it. And in fact, we could even make it a little better because there's already 3 days in the middle of the year. The one modification I would make is make the overlithe an extra Yule day. So that instead of having 3 and sometimes 4 mid-year's days, but always only 2 Yule days, you would every 4 years get a third Yule day.
That's the Sisto reckoning.
The Sisto reckoning. There you go. I like that. All right.
Take note, everyone.
Let's make it a thing. All right. Tolkien then steps out of explaining the calendar itself. And like I pointed out when you finished the reading, I love this. He shifts to a discussion about how it came to be. And I love that it starts out by the fact that the Hobbits just weren't great timekeepers early on. Vague and inaccurate, which totally fits everything I can imagine about Hobbits.
Exactly. They didn't need to be.
No.
So they settled down, not necessarily 1601 when the Shire was founded, but likely earlier as they began settling in Bree. They took the King's Reckoning system as their own. We'll get to the King's Reckoning later, but the text here tells us that even that was ultimately of Eldarin origin. So we'll talk about the Elves calendar first.
Which is to say next, but not yet.
Okay.
So we're going to finish up the Shire calendar discussion, then we'll move on to the Elves calendar, and then to the King's Reckoning. So more on the Shire Reckoning as it came to be called. This had a few changes, and we'll go over those from the King's Reckoning. It was also used in Bree, but in Bree they didn't change the year. So for them, Third Age 1602 was still Third Age 1602, whereas in the Shire it was Shire Reckoning 2. Of course, only the Hobbits of the Shire followed that. I'm sure the Hobbits and Bree were a little bit like, what is with you? You think you're special.
Easy calculation, though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, thank goodness.
Nice round number. Yeah.
I know. Like, what if they got the Shire in 1647? Right. All of a sudden, that makes the math a lot more frustrating.
Exactly.
Anyway. Yeah.
Then we get a bit of the frame narrative here as Tolkien himself talks about the process by which he obtained and laid out all this information. And he talked about the challenge of finding any precision when dealing with, quote, old tales and traditions.
Even if they're old tales and traditions he made up.
He's not letting on.
Right. He's not letting on. And I absolutely love that consistency. The Hobbits are now careful to write this stuff all down. And it's thanks to 2 things that he tells us. One is their interest in family trees, which of course we see from the very beginning. We see that in the prologue. And I think we even see a little bit of it in The Hobbit, but also their newfound interest in history after the War of the Ring, which you and I just talked about in Appendix B, The Tale of Years, recently.
Yeah. Now, Tolkien's own admission and excuse is that he's not good at this. Clearly a lie.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And might have made mistakes, quite possibly. And the final bit about how the chronology of the, quote, crucial years, that's Third Age 30, 18, 19, or Shire Reckoning 14, 18, 19, is provided in such detail that at least those can be considered accurate.
I love that. He's like, okay, these 2 years, I've got my dates right. I guarantee you these are right. And they're right because I made them up. They're all right because I made them up. But yeah, these are particularly right, but there might be some errors elsewhere. And I love that, because of that, he doesn't really give us a lot of dates outside of those 2 years.
Right.
And there's a handful, but not many.
I do love the way he sort of feigns that uncertainty.
Yeah.
As things get further away from the people that are actually recording it.
Exactly. And that's the point, right? I mean, we get the Red Book of Westmarch, and it's going to be based on these records written by Frodo and by Merry and Pippin as well, and Sam too. And of course, those years are going to be very precise.
Yeah.
But as you said, as you get further and further out, it's why a lot of times when you're looking at some things in the Tale of Years, it's more like circa this,
right?
Exactly. Like TA 1000, the Astari arrive. Hey, whatever. It might have been 987. It might have been 1013. Who knows?
Yeah.
But here we can rest assured that the dates, the very precise dates, are correct.
Yep. So, do you want to continue reading for us?
Yeah. Well, now we're going to get to talk about the elves, who are very concerned about precision, but also count really funny. Let's get into that. It seems clear that the Eldar in Middle-earth, who had, as Samwise remarked, more time at their disposal, reckoned in long periods, and the Quenya word yen, often translated year, really means 144 of our years. The Eldar preferred to reckon in 6s and 12s as far as possible. A day of the sun they called re, and reckoned from sunset to sunset. The yen contained 52,596 days. For ritual rather than practical purposes, the Eldar observed a week or enquie of 6 days, and the yen contained 8,766 of these enquier, reckoned continuously throughout the period. Folks, I hope you're still with me because I get to keep going. So we've got 52,000 days in a year because the year's actually 144 years. This is wild. We'll get more into this in a bit, but let's.
If you're an elf, it makes sense. It's
of course you are.
Completely natural.
Because if it doesn't make sense, you can just figure it out over the next 177 years.
You've got time. That's right. You've got plenty of time to work.
You got time. You got time to work it out. I'm in my 213th year of studying the calendar. I'll figure it out eventually. All right. In Middle-earth, the Eldar also observed a short period, or solar year, called a coronar, or sun round, when considered more or less astronomically, but usually called loa, growth, especially in the northwestern lands, when the seasonal changes in vegetation were primarily considered, as was usual with the elves generally. The loa was broken up into periods that might be regarded either as long months or short seasons. These no doubt varied in different regions, but the Hobbits only provide information concerning the calendar of Imladris. In that calendar, there were 6 of these seasons, of which the Quenya names were Tuile, Laire, Yavie, Quelle, Rive, Coire, which may be translated spring, summer, autumn, fading, winter, stirring. The Sindarin names were Ethwil, Lair, Yavas, Firith, Ru, Echwir. Fading was also called Las Selanta, leaf fall, or in Sindarin, Narbeleth, sun waning. Laire and Hrive each contained 72 days, and the remainder 54 each. The Loa began with Yestare, the day immediately before Tuile, and ended with Mettare, the day immediately after Coire. Between Yavie and Quelle were inserted 3 Enderi, or middle days. This provided a year of 365 days, which was supplemented by doubling the Enderi, adding 3 days, in every 12th year. How any resulting inaccuracy was dealt with is uncertain. If the year was then of the same length as now, the yen would have been more than a day too long. That there was an inaccuracy is shown by a note in the calendars of the Red Book, to the effect that in the reckoning of Rivendell, the last year of every 3rd yen was shortened by 3 days. The doubling of the 3 Enderi due in that year was omitted. Quote, but that has not happened in our time. Of the adjustment of any remaining inaccuracy, there is no record.
So what strikes me as interesting about this is it seems so based on agriculture.
Yeah.
This notion of seasons that are of differing lengths and it depending on where you are and so on is a much more agriculturally derived calendar system than an astronomical one.
Yes, absolutely. Which is interesting given the elves focus on the stars.
Right.
I mean, that sort of threw me. Like I expected it to be very astronomical. And like you said, it's agricultural.
Yeah, very much
Even the names of the seasons, right? Spring, summer, autumn, fading, winter, and stirring. It's really interesting, those 2 extra seasons.
Yeah. It's also interesting, any calendar system is dealing with this problem that the various astronomical things don't line up, right? The fact that the moon and the sun and the Earth's rotation, everything like that, don't neatly fit into one another.
And it's why we need leap years, but not leap years on the century, except for every 4th century.
Yeah.
I mean,
and even then we need to add leap seconds and stuff like that. Just, these additional refinements to get more and more accurate. Mm-hmm. And of course the elves would have dealt with that as well. But it's interesting that Tolkien suggests that we don't have any evidence of how they dealt with some of those things.
How any resulting inaccuracy was dealt with is uncertain. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's no surprise, though, that the elf system has to be really complicated and based on an entirely different reckoning than the Shire calendar.
Totally different.
Let alone our own calendar here in the primary world.
I know. It's wild, this idea of 54 and 72 day months, but as we'll see, that's related to how they like to think. In fairness to the elves, as complex as it is, they live a really, really long time, Samwise remarked. And I love that there's actually a mention of that. And of course, they would take the long view. I am curious, though, if you can identify for me any particular reason in the text why they preferred to reckon in 6s and 12s.
I don't know, other than to say that it's somewhat arbitrary, any
that's true. Any
number system that we adopt, and different cultures in the primary world have adopted different things, right?
True,
of course, famously, we've got a lot of cultures, starting with the Babylonians, being very focused on 60.
Right, which is why we have 60 seconds and 60 minutes. That's why we have
60 seconds and 60 minutes and 360 degrees in a circle and all of that sort of stuff.
It's such a highly divisible number. It makes sense.
Yeah, and similarly with the there being 24 hours in a day, again, that's very, very divisible. Which is probably a big motivation for it, because you can obviously halve it, you can third it, you can quarter it.
That's true. You can't do that with 5s and 10s. I mean, you can basically only have 10s and things like that. If you think
so, it's entirely possible that that's one of the benefits that the elves would why the elves would pick 6 and 12, because they also 6 obviously can be halved or split into thirds. 12s can also be split into quarters and so on. That may be a reason. I don't know. I can't think of.
I was trying to think, like, are there 6 Valar? Nope. There are 8 Valar. There are there 12? No. The only thing I could think of was that there was allegedly 144 of them originally awoken at Lake Cuiviénen.
There's 2 things there, yeah. So in Cuiviénen, there of course were the original 3 were in pairs, right? So you get the male and female, so you get 6.
Right.
And then you also, as you mentioned, get the 144 that those 6 then eventually found.
Which is 12 12s.
If we had to guess, I would say that's probably the strongest.
Yeah, that's about the only thing I could think of. And actually, that only came to my mind as we were talking about it today when I was writing this. I didn't originally think of that. But then I was like, wait a minute, 144, because that's how many years are in their yen.
Yes.
That's how many elves were awakened at Cuiviénen, and so maybe that's connected. Let's go ahead and dive into that system. We'll start with the Elvish year. That's the yen, the 144 years. I want to point out the footnote here refers back to Galadriel's lament, because it's the only place where yen is mentioned. And the first 2 lines of that are, I laurie lantarlassi surnen yeniunotime veramaral which is translated as, like gold fall the leaves in the wind, long years numberless as the wings of trees. Yeni unotime.
Yep, long years. Yep. So in this case, yeni is plural, the long years. Yen is the singular. Of course, this is a great example of the way that Quenya nouns, if they end in a consonant, are pluralized by adding an I.
Exactly. And if they end in a vowel, they're pluralized by adding the R, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And just out of interest, preempting some of the stuff we're going to talk about perhaps in Appendix E, Sindarin has a slightly different way of making things plural. It doesn't add an I anymore because there's been some sound changes, but what it actually does is makes the vowels more I-like.
Yeah. So like Amon to Emin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's actually going on there is each of the vowels, because it originally had an I at the end in primitive Eldarin. What happened, and the same thing happened in English. It's why we have the plural of goose is geese and foot is feet and so on, man is men. All of those are examples where the vowel has been influenced by an I that used to be there and then dropped out. So Sindarin does that. The Quenya has the I still there.
Which makes sense. It's the older language.
Right, exactly. A lot more conservative, But of course, this yen that gets glossed as year isn't really a year, right? We're talking about the elves' perception of what we would think of as maybe a year, but in their case, it's 144 of our years, because as we've discussed, they reckon in 6s and 12s, and 144 is, of course, 12 12s. We also get their name for a day called Rare, and it's not from midnight to midnight like we do, or even sunrise to sunrise, but sunset to sunset.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Of course, that's another arbitrary thing. There's no reason. Like, we take for granted that it would be midnight to midnight, but
hasn't always been the case.
That's almost the tail wagging the dog, because
it is.
We only know about midnight because we've already split things up into 24 hours.
Because we've decided the clock starts at,
exactly.
at 00 in the middle of the night. I'm trying to think of primary world stuff. I know that the Jewish calendar marks the days from sunset to sunset.
Yeah, the Islamic calendar might as well. I
can't remember.
I'm not sure. I was wondering about that. But,
medieval Europe did, though. I mean, that's actually why, we have like these vestigial holidays like Christmas Eve or even Halloween. They're actually just remnants of the time when the holidays began the prior evening, because the day went sunset to sunset.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. We'll see later that I think it's the Númenóreans that end up taking it sunrise to sunrise instead. because they make so many changes. They really
Right.
do. But it's just really interesting to see. And like you said, it is arbitrary. So, a yen, of course, 144 years. That means it has 52,596 days. When you do the math, that works out to 365 and a quarter days per year. That is very close to the real astronomical days, which is 365.2422.
Right. And of course, that 0.25, if that's what it actually was, then you could get away with a leap year every 4 years.
Right. And you wouldn't have to change it.
You wouldn't have to do the every 100, except when it's a multiple of 400 and all that sort of stuff to get closer and closer to the 0.2422. But that's about all the similarities with our calendar, right?
Yeah.
Because the elves observed, as we discussed, a 6-day week, or enquier, giving them precisely 8,766 of these weird weeks in a yen.
6-day week.
And the next couple of paragraphs describe how the elves observe their solar year. So this is when they're bringing in something that's obviously a lot more natural to us, but it's unavoidable because it's astronomical, right? The sun's the Earth's still revolving, going around the sun.
Earth does what it does, elves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which they call kor-anar, which literally means sun round.
Yeah, anar, right?
I just put anar, sun, but even the kor is found in the word for ring.
Yeah.
The sun round, the ring.
The sun ring.
the sun, yeah, exactly. And this is really different from the Shire calendar, with one interesting similarity.
And we'll start with what's the same, right? They have a similar year-end and mid-year arrangement. There's a single day ending the year, special day outside of the months, and a single day starting the year, and some days in the middle. Now, unlike the whole Shire calendar we just looked at, where you've always got 3 days and sometimes it's 4, their middle days were also usually 3, but instead of doing an extra day every 4 years, they would simply double the middle days to 6, but they would do it every 12th year.
Right, because why not?
Yeah, why not? We're elves.
But notice again then that it's every 12th year.
Right, because it's in multiples of 12. They have to think in multiples of 6 and 12, and they couldn't do it at 6,
right?
Because that would be 1.5 days.
Right, exactly.
Right, so.
But also it means that the number of those special days is either 3 or 6, never 4.
Right, which isn't part of a multiple. It's a multiple of 12, or it's a divisible by 12. It's 12 is divisible by it, but not by 6. 6 isn't divisible by 4. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting. They've got a leap day every 12 years instead of every 4 years, but then they have to add 3, of course, because 12 is 3 times 4. So it's the same math, but they end up with the same problem that we have.
Right, which is that the year isn't 365 and a quarter days, but 365.2422. That's why in the primary world, we don't observe leap years on the century year. Like 1900 was not a leap year. Ironically, 2000 was. 2100, 2200, 2300 won't be, but 2400 will be.
Right, exactly. And ironically, that's still not quite right. Our calendar is still 1 day too slow for every 3,231 years. So we'll have to skip a day somewhere in the distant future.
Fortunately, that's not in our lifetimes. But here's the thing. Elves live so long, this is a problem they'd have to solve.
Yes.
I mean, their calendars would be out of date in their lifetimes because their lifetimes are so long. So they get closer to it by skipping the doubling of those middle days in the last year of every 3rd yen. Now, that means that every 432 sun rounds or solar years, they would skip those extra 3 days.
Mm-hmm. So while our Gregorian calendar skips 3 leap days every 400 years, the Elves calendar skips 3 leap days every 432 years.
Okay. So interesting. I mean, there's still going to be a fix to be made, but that's a pretty small one.
In either case.
Yeah, that's true, because our calendar is definitely not exactly correct. Now, that leap day, leap year digression aside, and I don't apologize for it. I stand by it. We own it. We needed to talk through that. While Elves' calendars may have been different in different places, and man, that just opens the doors for like, what did it look like in Lorien, right? Or what did it look like in Thranduil's court? We're looking here at the Reckoning of Rivendell. It's the calendar used in Imladris. And of course that makes sense because we get the Red Book from the Hobbits, and that's the only Elvish calendar that they would have had the details for. Yep. Gimli might have the Reckoning of Lorien.
Right, yes.
But he didn't write this, so...
Exactly. And this is where things really deviate from our typical months in a year.
Yeah.
Right? They have 6 seasons of varying length, though again, all multiples of 6 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
So first up is Tuile, their spring, which was a 54-day, that's 9 times 6 day weeks. It's a season roughly corresponding to April 7th to May 30th. And in Sindarin, this was called Ethuil.
And that's their spring. So their summer, Laire, corresponded to June 1st to August 9th. It was a 72-day season. So that's 12 6-day weeks, very much in that 6 and 12 vein again. And that was Sindarin Laire. Next up was Yavier, their autumn. Now we're back to a 54-day season. And that was August 10th to October 3rd, Sindarin Yavas.
After that was their middle days, known as Enderi, corresponding to October 4th to 6th. And then their fading season, known as Quella, which was another 54-day season running from October 7th to November 30th. In Sindarin, that was called Firith.
This was also referred to, though, as Lasselanta, or leaf fall, or in Sindarin, Narbeleth, sun waning, which we will see again, by the way, so hold on to that. And basically, there's a symmetry to this. So it mirrors the 54, 72, 54-day structure that we saw in the first half of the year. So now they have a 72-day winter, Hrive, that ran from December 1st to February 10th. That was Sindarin Ru. I'm going to mess this up again, folks. Ru, R-H-I-W. That's such a weird one for me to try to pronounce. James, can you do it better? It's just Ru?
Pronounce it as if it was H-R.
Oh.
And trill it.
Okay. Ru. All right. There we go.
And then a season called Stirring, or Koire. Now, we've been told, remember, that Re means day.
Yeah.
And Koi we saw before in the context of the languages. Remember when we talked about the living language?
Yes.
Koi came up. It also appeared in the Quenya word for lembas.
Yeah.
So it's to do with life, right?
Yeah.
Stirring is literally kind of a day that's alive.
Yeah.
The day of living.
Ooh, I love that name.
Which was 54 days, corresponding to February 11th to April 4th. And that in Sindarin was Ekur. Then the year would end on Metare, or last day, April 5th, before beginning again on Yestare, April 6th.
Now, all of this, as fascinating as it is radically different from how Tolkien originally envisioned the Eldar calendar in the first draft found in the Peoples of Middle-earth.
There we read, normally the Eldar divided their year of 366 days into 12 months, 6 of 31 and 6 of 30 days. They alternated from January to June, 31-30, from July to December, 30-31. It will be observed that their months thus had the same length as ours except for February, 30, and July, 30. Every 8th year, they got rid of their excess of 6 days by reducing all months to 30 days, and these years were called 60-week years, or short years.
Now, that would be confusing, right? To have a year that's a full week shorter every 8 years, or every 8 years. That's just, I don't know how to even, that one really confused me, I have to admit. But even in this version, the Elves week still had 6 days. So it meant they had 61 weeks most of the time, but every 8 years, they'd only have 60 weeks.
Yep. Although it's interesting, again, I don't know the historical reason for dividing our week into 7.
That's a very good question.
Is it just purely the Genesis account, or are there other cultures that adopted the division into 7? I'm not sure, because I don't think there's an astronomical reason.
The only thing I can think of is that it's closer to the 28-day cycle of the moon.
It does fit reasonably nicely into the lunar cycle, yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of. But then why didn't we keep the moon cycle and
Yeah.
then figure out how to make that fit into the year? I don't know. That's a good one. Maybe I'll look into that in the P5. I know we've got another 2 or 3 things that we've marked for discussion there, but that might be something to look into.
But I mean, I think the main thing here, which I'm sure Tolkien really enjoyed exploring, was not all of the things in our primary world need necessarily be the case. There's certain things that are somewhat arbitrary.
Could be different. Yeah.
You know, there's certainly constraints astronomically, and we've talked about agriculturally as well. But within that, there's different ways of solving these challenges. And I'm sure Tolkien loved this idea of exploring.
And I love that he did it through all these different calendar systems.
Yes.
That even still, maybe 10% of the people who've read The Lord of the Rings have read.
But I almost wonder if it's like him constantly wanting to try different poetic forms and coming up with new ways of rhyming and things like that.
And then doing it better. than anybody else had ever done it.
And I wonder if it's the same thing. It's like, oh, it's not enough just to come up with my calendar system, but I'm going to come up with another calendar system and another calendar system.
And they're all going to work.
Explain in world how they relate to one another.
And it's all about that inconsistency of reality. Yeah. Unbelievable.
So this whole idea of the elves having the 61 weeks and then the 60 weeks every 8 years, this still resulted in an extra day every 100 years. So they dropped the last day of December completely, even skipping the 6th day of the week before starting the new year.
That would be confusing, but fortunately you'd only have to deal with that every 100 years.
But as we've discussed, it's not like we don't do this the same. It's just a different solution to a problem that we all have living on this planet.
Well, that's a good point. All right, soon we're going to get back to what the Númenóreans did with the Elvish calendar, but before we do, we want to remind you that there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast than just us.
The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all our social media spaces. Check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
Now on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony podcast. Follow the page to get the news and episode drops, but join the group to get involved in some great discussions.
On Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube, we're at Prancing Pony Pod. Or if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/Prancing Pony Pod.
And if you want daily Tolkien content, check out Today's Tolkien Times on the PPP YouTube channel and on all your favorite podcast apps. That's my short format daily show. It's got everything from Middle-earth Map Mondays to Fandom Fridays. And there's my new twice weekly streaming of all fun things Middle-earth on the PPP Plays. Be sure to check both of them out on the YouTube channel for all the PPP productions at youtube.com/@prancingponypod. James, let's get into the King's Reckoning.
Okay. The Númenóreans altered these arrangements. They divided the lower into shorter periods of more regular length, and they adhered to the custom of beginning the year in midwinter, which had been used by men of the northwest from whom they were derived in the First Age. Later, they also made their week one of 7 days, and they reckoned the day from sunrise out of the eastern sea to sunrise. The Númenórean system, as used in Númenor and in Arnor and Gondor until the end of the Kings, was called King's Reckoning. The normal year had 365 days. It was divided into 12 astar, or months, of which 10 had 30 days and 2 had 31. The long astar were those on either side of the mid-year, approximately our June and July. The first day of the year was called Yestare. The middle day, the 183rd, was called Loende, and the last day, Metare. These 3 days belonged to no month. In every fourth year, except the last of a century, Haranye, 2 Enderi or middle days were substituted for the Loende. In Númenor, calculations started with Second Age 1. The deficit caused by deducting 1 day from the last year of a century was not adjusted until the last year of a millennium, leaving a millennial deficit of 4 hours, 46 minutes, 40 seconds. This addition was made in Númenor in Second Age 1000, 2000, and 3000.
Fascinating. I love what they've done. We get to the King's Reckoning, and this is a system that's around for a very long time because it's not only used in Númenor throughout the Second Age, but even in the realms in exile in Arnor and Gondor until the end of the Line of the Kings.
And this is the one that the Shire calendar is more clearly connected to, as we'll see.
That's right.
I love the way that this started. The Númenóreans altered these arrangements.
Pray I do not alter them any further. That was literally the first thing I heard in my head. The elves like, but you changed our calendar. Pray I do not alter them any further. Oh, man. Good stuff. So they make 4 really big changes, right? First, they divided the year into shorter, more regular lengths, what we would see as months rather than seasons. And second, they began the year in midwinter. And for them, that was a tradition dating back to men of the First Age.
Third, they changed the week length from 6 days to 7 days. And we'll talk about what they called that 7th day later.
Yeah.
And finally, they changed the day itself to go from sunrise to sunrise, which the ancient Egyptians did as well.
Yeah, I was looking that up. I was like, okay, when we talked about the sunset to sunset, so I'm like looking and doing my research, like what cultures did sunrise to sunrise? I thought it was interesting that ancient Egypt did, because that's not the only connection to ancient Egypt we get with the Númenóreans.
Right. And I am wondering whether it's that sort of sun worship. And
yeah.
I think it's significant that the Númenóreans...
I think it is. Because it's a change.
Yeah.
It's definitely significant. And the fact that we see Tolkien explicitly connecting them to ancient Egypt in his letters.
Yes.
And then we see all the themes of, the struggle for immortality, and but basically turns into mummification, the building of these massive monuments to the dead, what Faramir talks about, how the lines of your ancestors are more important than your children.
Yep.
Which, coming from Faramir, is obviously true because Denethor doesn't care. It's just really interesting that we see yet another connection to ancient Egypt. And it's just a subtle one, but they still, of course, had the same length of year or sun round as the elves. That's 365 days. But in their case, they divided it into 12 months. Those were called Astar, with 10 of those 12 having 30 days, and then the two on either side of mid-year, having 31.
And you can see the similarity with the Shire calendar, where they had all 12 months of 30 days with a 3-day long mid-year.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same thing, really.
Right. You can see the trajectory that it's following. And like the Shire calendar, the King's Reckoning special days belonged to no month.
I love that phrase. I am no month. You do not look upon a month. You look upon a day. So they kept the names of the first and last days from the elves' calendar, Yestare and Metare, which literally mean first day and last day. So, of course, they're going to keep those names. They did go with the singular for middle day, which was Loende.
Except for their leap years, of course, when they'd have 2 mid-year days.
Yeah.
And then they were called Enderi, just like in the Reckoning of Rivendell.
Right.
And like with their own Gregorian calendar, they skipped the leap year at the end of every century. They're called Haranye.
And then we get an explanation of the millennial deficit, the whole reason why we do observe a leap year at the end of every 4th century. This deficit, instead of being fixed every 400 years, was added in Second Age 1000, 2000, and 3000. We also, in the part that we skipped, learned that Elendil and the exiles kept this calendar when they established Gondor and Arnor, but that the change in years at the end of the Second Age kind of messed them up.
Because, of course, if you're trying to go on an exact boundary like the 1000,
like the millennium mark.
So right, exactly. Then if you don't start the next age on the millennium mark, then your millennial boundary
your millennial correction is off. Right.
Exactly. So specifically, Second Age 3442 became Third Age 1. So when they made Third Age 4 a leap year instead of Third Age 3, which would have corresponded to Second Age 3444,
which would have had a leap year then.
Exactly. They created an additional deficit.
Yeah.
Similarly, the millennial fixes were made 441 years late each time.
It's a little late,
right? Because Third Age 1000 and 2000, what would have been Second Age 4441 and 5441.
Yeah.
And we'll get to how that got fixed in the next section.
That's right. But before we do, a quick aside on the changes in the drafts to the Númenórean calendar. Christopher Tolkien summarizes, in the first draft of Appendix D, there were 12 months of 30 days each in a year of 365 days, with a period of 5 days standing outside the months, called the summer days, between June 30th and July 1st, the third of these being called Mid-Year's Day. Every 4th year was a leap year with 6 summer days, including 2 Mid-Year's Days. From this calendar, that of the Hobbits was derived, with the 5 extra days dispersed into 3 summer days, Lithe days, and 2 Yule days, the leap year day being Overlithe. Now, set this to the side, folks, because this D1 version of the Númenórean calendar is what ends up being the Steward's Reckoning.
So in the second draft, created very shortly after the first one, according to Christopher, quote, the Númenórean calendar had 8 months of 30 days and 4 months of 31, January, June, July, December, requiring only 1 extra day, mid-year day, standing outside the months. That this, as in the first draft, being doubled every 4th year. Now, this is connected to how the Shire calendar followed the King's Reckoning. As Christopher says, my father explained that they did, in effect, retain the 4 31-day months in the 2 Yule days, January and December, and 2 Lithe days, June, July on either side of the mid-year's day, although these in the Hobbit calendar were not counted in the months.
And that goes back to their whole idea of keeping the weekdays square.
Exactly. So the structure is very similar. They just took them out of the month. They said,
exactly.
Rather than having 31-day months, we're going to have 30-day months, but there's going to be extra.
Yeah,
exactly.
Then they won't belong to any month.
Exactly.
It's it's really interesting. It's so elegant to see these little pieces moving as they solve different problems that each culture wants. The Hobbits want the simplicity of every month being the same length and having the weeks start on the same day and all that stuff.
Yep.
And they're able to achieve it, but they have to do some violence to the calendar to make it work.
Right. Exactly.
And yet here we've got this King's Reckoning in the draft version, for instance. There's no mention of any sort of Yule at all. It's just let's put all those 5 days in the middle of the year and take them out of the month. Right? Yep. They're not the between June 30th and July 1st. There's a 5-day period or 6 days on a leap year that are in no month at all. But there's still some, there's got some observance of Yule, but it's not outside of a month like it is in the Shire. So the Shire's like, I like the party idea, but let's have 2 parties. We'll have a shorter party in the middle and one in the winter as well, instead of one 5-day party in the middle of the year. So, again, it's just tweaking it, little small tweaks. And you can see Tolkien sort of like, I like this calendar, but what if we did this? Okay, let's give that to the kings. Let's give this one to the stewards, and let's give this one to the Shire.
Right, exactly. Now, speaking of the stewards, Alan, would you like to continue to read the next part for us?
I will indeed. The revised calendar introduced by Mardil was called Steward's Reckoning and was adopted eventually by most of the users of the Westron language, except the Hobbits. That wasn't an aside from me, folks. That was an aside in the text. I just want to make the reading very clear. Coming back to the text. The months were all of 30 days, and 2 days outside the months were introduced, one between the 3rd and 4th months, March, April, and one between the 9th and 10th, September, October. These 5 days outside the months, Yestare, Tuilere, Loende, Javiere, and Mettere, were holidays. The Hobbits were conservative and continued to use a form of King's Reckoning adapted to fit their own customs. Their months were all equal and had 30 days each, but they had 3 summer days, called in the Shire the Lithe or the Lithe days, between June and July. The last day of the year and the first of the next year were called the Yule days. The Yule days and the Lithe days remained outside the months, so that January 1st was the second and not the first day of the year. So Happy New Year's doesn't happen on January 1st. It happens on 2 Yule, which isn't a month at all.
Exactly.
But it is a day. It's just not a month. It's a day of the week because it's a Saturday.
Saturday.
Because only
you could say the month is Yule, I guess, right?
I suppose the 2 months, the 2-day long month.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Anyway, coming back to the reading. Every 4th year, except in the last year of the century, there were 4 Lithe days. The Lithe days and the Yule days were the chief holidays and times of feasting. The additional Lithe day was added after Mid-Year's Day, and so the 184th day of the leap years was called Overlithe and was a day of special merrymaking. In full, Yuletide was 6 days long, including the last 3 and first 3 days of each year. The Shire folk introduced one small innovation of their own, eventually also adopted in Bree, which they called Shire Reform. They found the shifting of the weekday names in relation to dates from year to year untidy and inconvenient. So in the time of Isengrim II, they arranged that the odd day which put the succession out should have no weekday name. After that, Mid-Year's Day and the Overlithe was known only by its name and belonged to no week. In consequence of this reform, the year always began on the first day of the week and ended on the last day, and the same date in any one year had the same weekday name in all other years, so that Shire folk no longer bothered to put the weekday in their letters or diaries. They found this quite convenient at home, but not so convenient if they ever traveled further than Bree.
You can imagine awkward situations where somebody sort of says, I'll meet you next Monday.
Monday the 3rd, and you're like, wait a minute. No.
Hang on a sec. No, wait, what?
That's not Monday. What are you talking about? Yeah. That would be confusing.
But I love the fact that Tolkien considers the practical.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they don't have to put in their letters or diaries.
Yeah, exactly. What
just saving them time because they do write a lot of letters. Yeah, as we know.
Now, we skipped the first little bit of this section that explains the reason for this revised calendar known as the Stewards' Reckoning. It's what we wrapped up the last section with, the correction of the errors that took place when they shifted from the Second Age to the Third Age, as well as the so-called millennial deficits.
Exactly. Mardil fixed the calendar, rather like Pope Gregory XIII in 1582, fixing the calendar that Julius Caesar had created in 45 BC. So Mardil did this fix by adding 2 days to the current year at the time, that was Third Age 2059, which would have been Second Age 5500, and then he issued a new calendar for Third Age 2060 and beyond.
This reminds me, of course, what happened, I can't remember the year now, but there was a period of time in the early modern era for us where the dates changed. And
they skipped an entire week, right?
And so if you look at when was Isaac Newton born, or that's a bad example because we don't know for sure, but things where we have specific dates, they'll often have to give it in two reckonings, even in the primary world, the old style versus the new style of dates. So it's fun that we get the same sort of thing going on with Mardil's reform.
Yeah, corrections. And we'll probably have another correction, unlikely in our lifetimes, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, speak for yourself. Not that I'm
You're not that much younger. Don Marshall, on the other hand, it might happen in his lifetime.
That's true. But all these Mardil's reforms, still left an 8-hour deficit.
Yeah.
So in Third Age 2360, the steward Hador added 1 day. Interestingly, he added it a bit early. The deficit hadn't reached a full day yet. He preemptively
why not? Get ahead of yourself a bit, right?
Exactly. The text tells us no more adjustments were made after that, partly because of the threat of war by Third Age 3000. Still, the deficit hadn't added up to a full day by the end of the Third Age.
Easy enough. And nobody's going to sit down and do the math when you're threatened by Sauron and the destruction of your entire realm.
That's kind of, we've got more important things.
It's a back burner issue.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, in the part we did read, we learned that the Stewards' Reckoning was widely adopted. Pretty much anywhere the Westron language went, the calendar went with it, except the Hobbits, because they're the Hobbits. I love it.
Of course. Finally, we get a layout of the calendar. No more 31-day months, instead 12 times 30-day months. With 2 more monthless days added, one between March and April and one between September and October.
And I thought that was an interesting solution rather than having a longer mid-year or adding it in the Yule.
Spread them out a bit.
Exactly. I like that, right? I mean, instead of 2 longer parties, you now spread them out. So, of course, you do have the monthless days that have names. I want to make sure you know that, folks, some of which you already know, right? Yestare, first day, Loende, middle day, and Mettare, last day. But the 2 new ones were named Tuelere, which means spring day, and Javiere, which means autumn day. So you had a holiday at the beginning of the year, you had one at the start of spring, the middle of the year, the start of fall, and the end of the year. That's nice.
Yep. And that's followed by an explanation of how the Shire calendar, which we started this episode looking at, differed from this Stewards' Reckoning, as it was more based on the King's Reckoning.
Right.
It's what we said before, Yule days 2 and live days 3 outside of the months, with a 4th live day serving as the leap day every 4 years. We do get a little bit extra about Yule. Sure, there are only 2 official Yule days, as in not
outside of the months, right.
But the Shire celebrated, of course, why wouldn't they, for 6 full days, the last 3 days of the year and the first 3 days of the next year.
Yeah. I got to say that feels very primary world. I don't know about you, but does anything happen between Christmas and New Year's?
Right, exactly.
We also get an explanation of the whole shifting of the days to the dates of the month known as the Shire Reform. They didn't like how, let's say, January 2nd was a Tuesday one year and a Friday a few years later. They found that untidy and inconvenient.
So they simply decided that the one day which knocks this out of order would simply not be a day of the week.
That's right.
That's when the mid-year's day and the overlive every 4th year became known only as those days. They did not belong to a month, as with the rest of Lithe and Yule, but they belonged to no week either.
Yeah.
That meant that the year always began on the first day of the week and ended on the last day. Just shift when the week starts to solve
exactly.
that problem.
Make it fix. Yeah.
They stopped having to use weekdays in their letters and diaries. After all, Monday, the 6th of Solmarth was redundant. The 6th of Solmarth was always a Monday.
I got to say, folks, there's a footnote, right? I mean, when you get a footnote to an appendix, that's arguably pretty pedantic. The footnote to this is absolutely hilarious, and it's a perfect example of Tolkien's humor, especially from the perspective of the Hobbits. He points out that if you look at the calendar at the front of the appendix, none of the months begin on a Friday. All of the other days have at least one month that starts on that day. And I was like, are you sure? Let me double check. And so I scroll. Sure enough, he's right. None of them start on a Friday. As a result, Tolkien writes, it thus became a jesting idiom in the Shire to speak of on Friday the 1st when referring to a day that did not exist, or to a day on which very unlikely events such as the flying of pigs or in the Shire the walking of trees might occur. Now, the full version of the idiom, Tolkien writes, was actually on Friday the 1st of Summerfilth, which is hilarious, not only because there is no Friday the 1st, but because there's also no Summerfilth. That's a made-up month. That's like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a made-up month. That's the 6th Tuesday of some month that doesn't exist.
Pentober.
Yeah, Pentober. Sure, why not? I mean, it's doubly hilarious. The 1st of Summerfilth. That's good stuff.
I'm going to use that next time I'm suggesting I'm not going to do something. I'll say, I'll solve that on Friday the 1st of Summerfilth. We'll get to that on Friday the 1st of Summerfilth.
Yeah, when somebody reaches out to me and says, I really want to get on the show. How do I get an interview with you? Let's talk on Friday the 1st of Summerfilth. Yeah. I'm kidding. All right. Well, speaking of Summerfilth, since that's not actually a month, let's talk about the actual names of months. James, could you pick up?
Absolutely. In the above notes, as in the narrative, I've used our modern names for both months and weekdays, though of course neither the Eldar, nor the Dunedain, nor the Hobbits actually did so. Translation of the Westron names seemed to be essential to avoid confusion, while the seasonal implications of our names are more or less the same, at any rate in the Shire. It appears, however, that Mid-Year's Day was intended to correspond as nearly as possible to the summer solstice. In that case, the Shire dates were actually in advance of ours by some 10 days, and our New Year's Day corresponded more or less to the Shire January 9th. And I'll actually talk about that in a little bit because it's quite significant, that comment. But continuing. In the Westron, the Quenya names of the months were usually retained as the Latin names are now widely used in alien languages. They were Narvigne, Nennimi, Sulime, Viresse, Lotesse, Narie, Kermie, Urime, Yavanie, Naquelie, Hissime, Ringere. The Sindarin names, used only by the Dunedain, were Narwine, Ninui, Gwairon, Gwirith, Lothron, Nori, Curveth, Uri, Ivaneth, Nabeleth, Hithui, Girithron.
Well done, sir.
Well,
24 names.
That I've never read before, to be honest, out loud anyway. In this nomenclature, the Hobbits, however, both of the Shire and of Bree, diverged from the Westron usage and adhered to old-fashioned local names of their own, which they seem to have picked up in antiquity from the men of the Vales of Anduin. At any rate, similar names were found in Dale and Rohan. The meanings of these names, devised by men, had, as a rule, long been forgotten by the Hobbits, even in cases where they had originally known what their significance was, and the forms of the names were much obscured in consequence. Math, for instance, at the end of some of them, is a reduction of month.
That makes sense. Well, here we get a big clue at the beginning of this about how to synchronize our calendars. Mid-Year's Day was supposed to correspond to the summer solstice, but which summer solstice? James, you've done a video on this. Can you help us get our heads around this?
Yeah, so amidst all of the discussion that we've had about the calendars, one of the things that I think we might accidentally take for granted is that the start of the year is the same as the start of our year.
Right.
Right.
Our January 1st
is their January 1st or whatever. Right? We've already talked about the fact that they have the Yule Day, that 2 Yule is actually the first day of the year. But it gets a bit more complicated than that because there's no reason for the start of the year to be the point at which our system is synchronized with theirs, because
Right.
the start of the year is somewhat arbitrary.
Yeah, it is.
But we're told in the passage that we just read that mid-year's day was intended to correspond roughly to the summer solstice. So that's actually the point that has astronomical significance and should be the point that we synchronize, right? So in other words, whatever the summer solstice is should be the mid-year's day, and you kind of work out everything else from that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, interestingly, if you work it out, we're actually told in what we read that New Year's Day corresponded more or less to the Shire January 9th.
Okay. So shift 8 days.
Right. So for that to work, what we actually have to use for the summer solstice is the traditional summer solstice in the Middle Ages, which was June 23rd. That works. If you equate June 23rd with Midsummer's Day, the mid-year's day, then it all works out. You get that matching with the 9th of January.
Oh,
in
interesting.
the Shire calendar being the first.
Because isn't it like the 20th or 21st for the most part? I mean, I guess.
Yes, it's normally the 20th. It's normally the 21st. Depends on if it's a leap year. It's a year, a day earlier.
Okay.
But yes, essentially the true astronomical is the 21st, typically. But Tolkien seems to be using the 23rd, which was the more traditional medieval date, in order for this to work out. But one of the implications of this that I just want to mention is that means when we pick certain dates like March 25th,
oh no,
or September 22nd.
Oh boy, yeah, it's not really those dates.
That's just the label that they give it to it. It doesn't correspond in terms of how many days into the year we are.
Right.
To our March 25th or September 22nd.
Oh boy.
So if we want to celebrate Bilbo's birthday the same number of days after mid-year's day as the Hobbits did.
Right, the same number of days into the year. Yeah.
Then we shouldn't celebrate it on September 22nd.
Oh no.
Similarly with March 25th. So all those dates are actually off if we wanted to celebrate it in terms of the right day of the year.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to include a link to that video in the show notes so that folks can watch that and kind of dig into those details, because I took a look at it myself, and you shared a really useful spreadsheet that sort of clarifies this and shows visually how that synchronization works and what dates then sync up. It's really interesting. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Tolkien does give us, if our New Year's Day corresponds to the Shire January 9th, well then, like you said, that must mean that mid-year's day is not on our summer solstice, but on the medieval summer solstice, the 23rd.
Yeah. And the fact that they can't line up exactly is obvious as well when you consider that there was a February the 30th, for example.
Yeah.
So imagine that what we want to celebrate, and I know we've got a mailbag question coming up that relates to this. Imagine we wanted to celebrate the Entmoot. Well, the Entmoot took place on February 30th. So what day what day in our calendar would we celebrate the Entmoot? We can't if we're just simply matching up the names of the name of the
month and the date.
But of course you could work out, it's a certain number of days into the year. We can quickly work it out because the 30th of February would be the 60th day after Second Yule. So the 61st day. The 61st day of the year would be when the Entmoot was. And so we can work it out what the corresponding day would be in our calendar. Or you could do it from the summer solstice. But we need to do something to allow for dates like the 30th of February. And it turns out the same is true for March 25th or September 22nd as well.
My goodness. Just to confuse things even further, yeah.
Exactly. We get the obvious point as well that the Westron names for both the months and the days in the Shire calendar have been translated into English.
Right? It's pretty clear, right?
They don't call them Friday and Saturday.
No.
And that gives us a little glimpse into the translation stuff that we'll be talking about more at length in a few weeks when we spend 2 episodes on Appendix F.
That's going to be a lot of fun. And this also is the section where we get the glorious Quenya and Sindarin names of the months. That was fantastic. A reminder, though, folks, the Eldar didn't actually use these Elvish names because their calendar had that odd 54, 72, 54 day mini seasons instead of months. These are instead Quenya names given to the months by the Númenóreans when they created the King's Reckoning. And that led me to this interesting question, James. What did the King's Men call the months once Quenya had been banned in Númenor?
Well, okay. So here's an interesting thing that just occurred to me. We didn't change our day of the week names from their pagan associations.
No, that's true. We did not.
Even after Christianity
Right.
came in. So it's interesting how conservative things like, our Latin-based month names, our month names are based on Roman gods and Roman emperors, and our weekday names are based on Norse gods and planets and that are worshipped.
Sun, moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
Thor and
Odin and exactly.
and Freya. And
the fact that they weren't changed tells you that there's something deeply conservative about those names.
About changing something, this kind of root, right? I mean, you're changing something very deep when you change a calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would have just still called it what they called it, even if Quenya as a spoken language to communicate was banned.
I wonder if there's a certain sense in which the origins may have been obscured as well. In the reading, we saw about that, the sort of names being obscured, things being forgotten by the Hobbits and so on, right?
Yeah. We forgot what well, of course, the Hobbits would. Somehow that doesn't surprise me, right? It's the same thing about their vague and inaccurate timekeeping. Right, we never really bothered to learn what that month meant, but even if we had, we'd have forgotten it by now.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
So maybe a little more surprising that the Númenóreans would do it. But still, I think, again, I just think of the primary world example of our own month and weekday names.
They just don't change. Yeah.
Let's do some quick word nerdery on those names.
Yeah.
Because Tolkien's attention to detail is breathtaking.
It really is. I mean, these names are amazing.
So Narvinje comes from nar, meaning fire, and Vinje for young, new, also new fire sun. And as with all of these, the Sindarin name, Narwine, has the same meaning. The month corresponds to after Yule in the Shire calendar and runs from our December 23rd to January 21st.
Mm-hmm.
Nenime means wetness, nen, water as in Quivienen or Nenya.
Mm-hmm.
The Sindarin name, Ninui, has the same meaning, and this corresponds to Shire month Solmath and runs from January 22nd to February 20th.
That's right. Now, Sulime's meaning might be something that you can guess if you remember Manwe's title, Sulimo, Lord of the Breath of Arda. Sulime comes from the root Sule, which means breath or wind, so the month name means windy one. Sindarin Gwairon means the exact same. You'll recognize an element from that. Mm-hmm. We see it in Gwaihir's name, Windlord. The month corresponds to Wreath in the Shire calendar and runs from our February 21st to March 22nd. Then we get Viresse, and it comes from the root W-I-R, weir or vir, meaning new, fresh, or young. Thus, Viresse means freshness. It's the same with Gwirith in Sindarin. The month corresponds to Astron in the Shire calendar, runs from March 23rd to April 21st. And now I'm thinking about soaps and deodorants promising lots of Viresse. The new Viresse scent. Yeah.
Lotesse includes the word for blossom, lotte, which we also see in Vinkalotte, foam flower. So this is the flower month or blossom month. Its Sindarin name, Lothron, means the same. Mm-hmm. The month corresponds to the Shire calendar month of Thrimage and runs from April 22nd to May 21st. And the last month before the mid-year's break is Narie, which uses the element nar, meaning fire, Naria, ring of fire. So it's the fiery month or the sunny month. Mm-hmm. The Sindarin name Norui means the same. The element there is the same as in Samath Nar. Mm-hmm. The month corresponds to the month of 4 Lithe plus 1 Lithe in the Shire calendar and runs from May 22nd to June 20.
So then we get the middle day or the middle days, and after that we get Kermie. Now that and its Sindarin equivalent Kerveth are both glossed as the 7th month. We weren't able to find any more on the word. I dug as deep as I could in eldamo.org. There is a Noldorin noun C-E-R-C-H, Kirch, meaning sickle. And so maybe if we're using that C-E-R from that, maybe it means harvest, because it doesn't seem connected to the other words that start with that C-E-R, like Keren for mound or Kerth for rune. So it kind of fits, maybe. I don't know. That's just a total guess on my part. The month corresponds to the Shire month after Lithe, with 2 Lithe added at the beginning. So it runs from June 24th to July 23rd. After Kermie comes Urme, with the element ure meaning heat. So hot one. And then anybody who knows August, late July and into August, knows for sure.
Happens to be my nickname too, hot one.
Urme, now co-hosting the PPP. Urui, the Sindarin name, means the same thing. It corresponds to the month of Wedmouth in the Shire calendar, runs from July 24th to August 22nd.
Next up is Yavanie. And I think you can all hear the name of Yavanna in that.
Yeah.
So we have the giver of fruits, literally fruit gift. Its Sindarin equivalent, Ivaneth, means the same, and it also references Yavanna. It corresponds to Shire month Halimath and runs from August 23rd to September 21st. Then we get Na Quellie, which might sound similar to one of the Elvish months' seasons, Quelle. That's because they both contain the element Quellie, meaning fading. Na Quellie simply adds the Nar element, fire, so sun fading. The Sindarin name Narbaleth means the same, and it was used by the elves for the same time of year. It was also called by the elves La Selanta, leaf fall. And it corresponds to Winterfilth and runs from September 22nd to October 21st.
Now, next up is Hisime, and I'm sure you recognize the element Hise, meaning mist. We see that in Hisilome, land of mist, or its Sindarin cognate Hith, like in Hithiglir, the misty mountains, or Hithline, the mist thread, literally, but it's the elvish rope. This means month of mist or misty one, with Hithwi, its Sindarin equivalent, meaning the exact same thing. The month corresponds to Blomouth in the Shire calendar and runs from October 22nd to November 20th. And then the year ends with the month of Ringare, which uses the element Ringa for cold. Here, the Sindarin name Girithron has a slightly different meaning, interestingly enough, because the Sindarin name is always meant the same in all of the other months. But here, Girithron, Girith is the element that means shuddering. So it's shuddering or shivering month for them, cold month in Quenya. Obviously, still the same thing, but not literally the same thing like it has been with the other words. This corresponds to the month of Foryule and runs from November 21st to December 20th.
But what about the Shire calendar names? Well, we've mentioned each one already, but we learn here that their month names were picked up in antiquity from men in the Vales of Anduin, and that some similar names were found in both Dale and Rohan. We don't know the meanings of the names anymore, but we are told at least that Math is a reduction of month.
Now, fortunately, we're also given some pronunciation tips, which helps, along with a list of where the names differed in Bree, because we've got to have different names everywhere. Some were the same to make it even more confusing, but there were quite a few changes. In Bree, after Yule became Frary, Astron became Chithing, Forlythe was just Lythe, and after Lythe was Mead, Halimath became Harvest Math, Winterfilth was Wintring, Blomouth became Bluting, and Foryule was simply Yule Math.
Some of these, especially Frary, Chithing, and Yulemath, were also used in the East Farthing, interestingly.
That is interesting. So the Bree influence on the East Farthing. Also, I have to note, by the way, Harvest Math, isn't that what they call the fall festival in Lord of the Rings Online?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So we're actually using the Bree name for that rather than the Shire name for that. I love it.
Good point. Yeah. This sort of dialect variation, of course, makes me think so much of Tolkien's mentor Joseph Wright, who was sort of did a lot of work in English dialects, and he would have done things like catalogued the different names that different towns in Yorkshire had for different things and so on. It's very much. I
love that. It's so interesting, and the fact that Tolkien not only decided to say that it was different in Bree, he then gives us the Bree dialect versions.
Right.
And then he shows the influence of Bree on the East Farthing by saying some of these guys. I mean, it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
And it is, I know it's crazy, sort of irrelevant detail. Like we said at the beginning of the episode, none of this has an impact on the story, on the narrative of the Lord of the Rings. But it is so fascinating to see yet again, so much attention to detail to create a world that has that inner consistency of reality.
And it obviously meant a lot to him.
Oh, yeah. He loved it, obviously, pouring this sort of detail in. Yeah.
One other interesting tidbit worth observing about Winterfilth, Christopher Tolkien explains in a footnote in Peoples that Winterfilth was the Old English name for the month of October. He writes, its meaning was discussed by Bede, who died in 735, who explained the name by reference to the ancient English division of the year into two parts of 6 months each, summer and winter. Winterfilth was so called because it was the first month of winter, but Philith, Bede supposed, referred to the full moon of October, marking the beginning of that period of the year.
Now, this is where it gets interesting because Tolkien, of course, had other ideas. That Bede, He was pretty good, pretty sharp, but I think it was different. Christopher explains, my father's interpretation of the name in the first draft, the filling completion of the year, winter being used in the sense year, is at variance both with Bede and apparently with that in the published text, which read the filling or completion of the year before winter. In either case, it must be supposed that the true words underlying translated filth and winter filth could make the same pun. Gee, Tolkien making a pun with an obscure Old English name of a month buried in an appendix. I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you. What am I going to do? My whole world is just shattered. Folks, if you're enjoying the PPP, please consider supporting the show by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. That's what gives me the time and resources I need to work on making the show the best that it can be. When you join, you become part of an amazing Discord community that includes live episode recordings and hangouts every month. You also get episode postscripts, ad-free episodes, free merch, and more.
You can also become part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes, or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
And you can always help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and a rating on Spotify. And please recommend us to your friends.
Okay, so we have some more names to read.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hand this one over to you, Alan, if you want to continue reading for us.
I will indeed. So we're going to move from month names to the day names and the season names here. The Hobbit week was taken from the Dunedain, and the names were translations of those given to the days in the Old North Kingdom, which in their turn were derived from the Eldar. The 6-day week of the Eldar, remember their week had 6 days, not 7, had days dedicated to or named after the stars, the sun, the moon, the 2 trees, the heavens, and the Valar, or powers in that order, the last day being the chief day of the week. Their names in Quenya were Elenia, Anaria, Isilia, Alduya, Menelia, Valania, or Tarion. The Sindarin names were Orgilion, Oronor, Orithil, Orgaladad, Ormenel, Orbeline, or Rodin. The Númenóreans retained the dedications and order, but altered the 4th day to Aldea, Orgalath. Now, I'm doing an aside to remind you, the Eldar version of that was Alduya. They changed it to Aldea. The Sindarin for Alduya was Orgaladad. The Sindarin for Aldea just became Orgalath, and we'll talk about that difference in a little bit. Back to the text. With reference to the white tree only, of which Nimloth that grew in the king's court in Númenor was believed to be a descendant. Also, desiring a 7th day, and being great mariners, they inserted a sea day, Eirenia, or Iron, after the Heavens Day. The Hobbits took over this arrangement, but the meanings of their translated names were soon forgotten, or no longer attended to, and the forms were much reduced, especially in everyday pronunciation. Then I'm going to skip a bit, and I want to get to the way those names looked in the Shire calendar. In these sources, the weekday names appear in archaic forms, of which the following are the oldest: Sterendai, Sunendai, Monendai, Truisdai, Heavenisdai, Merisdai, Haidai. In the language of the time of the War of the Ring, these had become Sterday, Sunday, Monday, Truesday, Heavensday or Hensday, Mersday, Highday. I have translated these names also into our own names, naturally beginning with Sunday and Monday, which occur in the Shire week with the same names as ours, and renaming the others in order. It must be noted, however, that the associations of the names were quite different in the Shire. The last day of the week, Friday, High Day, was the chief day and one of holiday afternoon and evening feasts. Saturday thus corresponds more nearly to our Monday and Thursday to our Saturday. There's our day names, and you know what? We actually skipped the season names, but we'll talk about them in the discussion.
Okay. So we move from the name of the months to the names of the days, and these are interesting. First, we get the names of the week in the 6-day Eldar week, or Enquier. Elenia, consisting of the Quenya element for star, Elen, and the adjectival suffix, so day of the stars, or in Sindarin, or Gilion, with the element gil for star, bright spark, like in Gil-galad.
I'm just going to tell you all now, folks, all the Sindarin names start with that OR element because that's just the element for day. Similarly, all the Quenya names end with the ya element, which is just the adjectival suffix because that makes it of the. So after Elenia comes Anaria, day of the sun, or Oranor in Sindarin. And you see the elements. They're pretty obvious, like Anar for sun, as in Anarian, or Sindarin Anor for sun, as in Minas Anor. So very clearly the sun.
Yep. And then we have Isilia, day of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Orithil in Sindarin. Again, the familiar Quenya element Isil for moon, as in Isildur, and the Sindarin cognate Ithil, as in Minas Ithil or Ithilden.
And now we get to one of the interesting ones. That's the day dedicated to the two trees in the Eldarin calendar, Alduya or Orgalavad in Sindarin. And this one is a bit more interesting because there is a specific inflection of the base root alda, meaning tree. Aldu is specifically two trees. It's not one, but it's also not plural in general. It's like the word pair. It's a specific word meaning two as opposed to multiple in general. So the one that's plural in general is Aldar, like in Aldarian, son of trees. So it's not Aldaria, which would be day of the trees in general, plural, but Alduya, the day dedicated to two trees, or the pair of trees.
Yep. Similarly, the Sindarin is an example of a dual noun. Tolkien actually tells us in a letter 347 to Richard Jeffrey, where he explains the Sindarin duals of nouns or pronouns early became obsolete, except in written works. A case occurs in Orgalavad, day of the two trees, but since these Sindarin nouns were all derived from Quenya names of the 6-day week brought from Valinor, it may be due to an attempt to imitate Quenya duals, such as Kiryat, two ships. In any case, the final D was later lost, and so we have Argonath, the group of two noble stones, instead of Argonad.
Interesting. So if we had kept that Sindarin dual noun for a pair, we would have had Argonad instead of Argonath, but we got rid of that.
Yeah, we still get the uth ending in a bunch of places where we have a collective group, not just Argonath.
But we've just lost the D.
Yep,
we just lost the thing that means pair as opposed to group.
Exactly.
Because the TH would be the group ending, just like Aldar would be a group of trees, multiple trees, plural trees, but Aldu is specifically just the pair.
Yep.
Anyway, moving on, we then have the day dedicated to the heavens, Menelia, or Ormenel in Sindarin. And here the element Menel is actually the same in both Quenya and Sindarin, meaning the heavens. We see that in Menel Tarma, the pillar of heaven, Tarmenel, high heaven, or Menel Makar, the swordsman of the sky, which is the name for the constellation Orion.
Yep. And finally, the day dedicated to the Valar. This day has two names in each. Quenya Valanya, referencing Vala, angelic power, or Tarion, with the element Tara for lofty, tall, high. This later one actually breaks with that pattern of days ending in Ya.
Yeah, I found that really surprising. Like, wait a minute, that's...
Yeah. And then the Sindarin Orbaline. And here we get the Sindarin word Balan, the plural Vala, with the alternative word Rodin, breaking the pattern of days starting with Or, which appears to be another Sindarin word for the plural Valar.
So the Númenóreans based their weekday names on these, but they did make two changes. One, they changed the fourth day of Alduya, or Orgalavad, to Aldea, or Orgalath, referencing only the singular white tree rather than the two trees. And that's how you get that singular versus dual noun discussion we talked about earlier.
But we also know they added a seventh day to the week, and thank goodness for that. A one-day weekend would be brutal.
Ooh. Though, what if it was a 4-day work week and a 2-day weekend?
Maybe.
I could go with that.
Yeah. Maybe we should adopt that as well as some other
That's
changes.
the Shire. That's the Shire reckoning.
The Sisto reckoning.
The Sisto reckoning. Sisto reckoning for sure.
That seventh day, since they were pretty incredible mariners, they named after the sea, Earenia, with Earen being the great sea. Ear alone is sea, but with the on suffix, it means great. So Earenia is day of the great sea. And the Sindarin word for this was Orairon, meaning the same thing.
We actually see the Sindarin word Aeron in the text in many meetings. Even as they stepped over the threshold, a single clear voice rose in song. Ah, Elbereth Gilthoniel, Silivrin Penna Miriel, O Menel Aglar Elenath, Nachaired Palandiriel, O Galath Remmen Ennarath, Fanuilos Lelinnathon, Nef Avar Si Nef Ayaron. And there's those last two lines of the hymn to Elbereth that are translated as here beyond the sea, beyond the wide and sundering sea. Ayaron.
And it's interesting, actually, we get a bunch of elements that we've seen.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm popping through those. Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute. We just saw Galad.
The Menel is there.
Yeah.
The Galath Remen. We get a bunch of things ending in Ath as well. All appear there. Yeah.
That's so amazing, because the more you study this, the more you start to see those patterns and those structures in the way the language is built.
Mm-hmm. I should teach a whole class about this. In fact, I am.
I think you have.
And I am as well. We're doing another run of
good. Good.
So we learned the Hobbits took the Númenórean arrangement, of course, since they based their calendar on the King's Reckoning, but completely forgot the meanings of the names.
Very Hobbity.
After all, it had been thousands of years since these names were originally translated.
That's fair, yeah.
And they don't live very long.
No, they don't.
In the part we skipped, we learned that the Hobbits stuck to the translations, but the Quenya names were actually used in some other areas where Westron was spoken.
That's kind of interesting, the idea that the Quenya names of the month, as opposed to the Westron names. Again, it just goes back to the conservative nature of changing these things, that somehow, even when the Westron language came along, we didn't change the Quenya names of the month.
Yep.
And that suggests what you mentioned earlier, which is that they basically just forgot about that being Quenya. That's just the name of the month.
Right. Yeah. I don't think many people think of Wednesday as being an Old Norse.
No, Odin's Day.
An Odin's Day, yeah.
Yeah. We also skipped a bit about the sources, which, I mean, I didn't want to skip it, but we have to skip something. We learned that, not surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of ancient history written down in the Shire by the end of the Third Age. And the book that had the oldest stuff in it, which is the Yearbook of Tuckborough, that had entries dating back 900 years before Frodo, but that's simply not old enough to capture the loss of these names.
Yeah. However, we do get to see the archaic names of the early Shire weekdays, and that's where we picked up too. So Day becomes Day, Day becomes Sunday, Day becomes Monday.
Right. Day becomes Day. Day becomes Heaven's Day or just Hen's Day. Like, I love that, because it sort of also even addresses the weird Wednesday spelling of Wednesday.
Exactly.
That's so good. Mares Day becomes Mares Day. High Day becomes High Day. But instead of Hihdei, it's High Day, High Day.
Yep. Tolkien then speaks as a translator, explaining that he started with the two names that are identical to our own English names, Sunday and Monday. He also explains that the week was a bit different. Their chief day was Friday. So their Saturday is the start of their work week, equivalent to our Monday. And their Thursday compares to our Saturday.
Oh man, I hate Saturdays.
So what do we do in the
Sister Reckoning?
Yes.
Oh man. Thursday compares to our Saturday. So Thursday, Friday becomes the weekend. Nah, let's keep the weekend the same. Let's keep weekend the same. All right. I'll develop the Sisto Reckoning. We'll talk.
Look forward to it.
P5. Yeah. So we did skip quite a bit after this, mostly so that we could set aside the new reckoning as its own topic. And that included the season names, which we kind of covered in the Eldar calendar, but it did also include mention of the elves paying closer attention to Twilight and not the vampire movies, I'm guessing.
I hope not.
Seriously, please.
Tolkien writes, chiefly as the times of star fading and star opening, because of course the elves were going to think in a very star-centric way.
It's interesting.
He gives the most usual names for these periods, which might sound familiar. Tindome and Undome. Think about Luthien Tenuvial, daughter of Twilight, and Arwen Undomia, even star.
Right. And he provides the Sindarin versions of those words as well, Menuial and Aduial, which were referred to in the Shire as Morodim and Evendim, hence Lake Evendim as a translation of Nenuial.
We also skipped a summary of the places where the differences between our calendar and the Shire calendar are important to the story, along with important mention that it's only the Shire reckoning that matters for the narrative of the War of the Ring. Again, why go through such painstaking work to create calendars that don't even impact the story?
So Tolkien.
Inconsistency of reality. That's
yeah. I mean, he could have just created the Shire Reckoning and left it at that. But he had to explain, well, the Shire Reckoning comes from the King's Reckoning, which comes from the Eldarin calendar. But then the King's Reckoning also became the Steward's Reckoning late. Wow.
Yeah.
That's just amazing. So the differences, though, between our calendar and the Shire calendar that are relevant include the fact that their October only has 30 days. February has 30 days, which we talked about, and that January 1st is actually the second day of Third Age 3019 or Shire Reckoning 1419. Hence, Tolkien says, and this is interesting because this conflicts with what we talked about earlier, March 25th, the date of the downfall of the Barad-dûr, and the date we observe Tolkien Reading Day on, would correspond to our March 27th if our years began at the same seasonal point. But James, this was what we talked about earlier when it comes to synchronizing our calendar. He kind of forgot the whole mid-years is supposed to be the summer solstice. Can you talk us through this?
Yeah, I have a lot of trouble reconciling this because it's clearly contradictory. It's clearly contradicted to his comment before about January the 9th being the equivalent to our year. And I mean, what it comes down to is, do you start our years at the same day?
January 1, January 1.
January 1, second Yule.
Well, right.
2 Yule, yeah. Or do you try to align the
actual number of days into the year?
Yeah. Do you align the mid-years days?
Really I see what you mean, yeah.
If you do start the year at the same point, you get one set of results. And if you align the mid-years day, you get a different set of results. This calculation he's doing here about March 25th corresponding to our March 27th, that works if you assume the first day of the year equals the first day of the year.
Right.
But that would mean that mid-years day would not correspond to the summer solstice.
Right. So then we lose that.
You can't have it both ways. So I'm not sure why this inconsistency crept in here. The only thing I can think of is he does say if our years began at the same seasonal point, not that they do. So he's potentially entertaining the fact that if you just consider those points that you mentioned, that October has only 30 days, that January the 1st is the second day, and that February has 30 days. So if you just consider the structure of the calendar and don't worry about synchronizing the summer solstice, then if you do that, then you would result in this discrepancy of March 25th actually being March 27th.
The extra January day because it starts a day later, and then February having 30 days.
Exactly.
That pushes us 2 days out.
That's how you get those. But if you do want to keep the mid-years day corresponding to the summer solstice, then that
changes entirely.
That's not the date that you end up with.
And it's interesting because, typically Christopher Tolkien in the History of Middle-earth, dives deep into these things and points out these sort of contradictions and then tries to either explain them away or say, I cannot explain why my father made this error, right? He doesn't actually bring this up at all. It's not mentioned that I could find.
So I would love to hear, if people are aware of scholarship that looks into this, I'd love to hear about it because I've not come across anything that
would be interesting
that reconciles this, other than to say, the only thing I can say about this is that the way that you synchronize there are multiple ways of synchronizing the two calendars. I think synchronizing at the mid-years day with the summer solstice kind of makes sense because that's an astronomical feature. It's not an arbitrary calendar, but there are potentially other ways you could do it. And maybe he was exploring one way or another way in the same. It's odd that he does that in the same text, though.
Yeah,
without any kind of explanation.
That does. Well, all of these calendars are moot now because we have a new one. James, can you tell us about the new reckoning?
Absolutely. In the new reckoning, the year began on March 25th, Old Style, in commemoration of the fall of Sauron and the deeds of the ring bearers. The months retained their former names, beginning now with Viresse, April, but referred to periods beginning generally 5 days earlier than previously. All the months had 30 days. There were 3 Enderi, or middle days, of which the second was called Loende, between Yavanye, September, Naquielie, October. That corresponded with September 23rd, 24th, 25th, Old Style. But in honour of Frodo, Yavanye 30, which corresponded with former September 22nd, his birthday, was made a festival, and the leap year was provided for by doubling this feast, called Comare, or Ring Day. And then skipping one paragraph, this reckoning was in the course of the reign of King Elisar, adopted in all his lands except the Shire where the old calendar was retained.
Except over here, we Hobbits are going to keep our own thing, dang it. I mean, how many times has it been except for the Hobbits or except the Shire? Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's quite all right. Wait till the Sisto reckoning comes in.
That's right.
Yeah. Fourth Age 1 was thus called 1422. And insofar as the Hobbits took any account of the change of age, they maintained that it began with 2 Yule 1422 and not the previous March. There is no record of the Shire folk commemorating either March 25th or September 22nd. But in the West Farthing, especially in the country round Hobbiton Hill, there grew up a custom of making holiday and dancing in the party field, when weather permitted, on April 6th. Some said it was old Sam Gardner's birthday, some that it was the day on which the golden tree first flowered in 1420, and some that it was the Elves' New Year. In the Buckland, the horn of the mark was blown at sundown every November 2nd, and bonfires and feastings followed.
All right. I love that. We've gotten through Appendix D. We get to the last of the systems, the new reckoning. It's set forth by Aragorn, King Elessar, in the Restored Kingdom.
As Tolkien explains, it goes back to something more like the King's Reckoning, but changed to fit a new year in the spring. And while that's to commemorate the fall of Sauron, it really just goes back to the Eldarin calendar, which begins approximately April 6th.
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea of a springtime New Year instead of a midwinter. Now, the month names remain the same, but they are shifted, and they would need to be since the year now starts in what was the old March 25th as opposed to March 1st or April 1st, in which case you wouldn't have to shift the month dates. So there are still 3 Inderi, or middle days, but they've got to be moved because they won't be mid-year anymore if we leave them where they used to be. So now we put them between Yevanier and Narquelier, basically September or October.
Those middle days corresponding with the old September 23rd to 25th. But we learned that in honour of Frodo, 30 Yevanier, which was his old September 22nd birthday, was a festival day. And in leap years, the extra day was added there, doubling the feast and calling it Cormare.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that the leap day, the special day of feasting in Gondor, is a celebration of Frodo and what he did with the ring. I love it.
A reminder that the Fourth Age started when Elrond left, but for calendar purposes, Fourth Age 1 begins on what was March 25th, 3021, 6 months before Elrond actually left.
That is confusing, but you've got to start you got to start the calendar somewhere. And you're like, going back and saying, all right, well, now we've got this new calendar. Oh, Elrond's left. Well, you know what? Let's go back and call this instead of, Third Age 3020. Well, it's the new year. Now just call it Fourth Age 1. So Third Age 3021 was a very short year. It only lasted less than 3 months.
Yeah.
I love this bit about how the new reckoning spread everywhere except for the Shire, because they're just keeping on, and they are the Hobbits. Fourth Age 1 was just 1422. Thank you very much. The Hobbits did still commemorate some things, just not the big picture things like March 25th, the fall of Sauron, the destruction of the ring, the fall of Barad-dûr. They didn't even celebrate September 22nd, the birthday of Frodo and Bilbo Baggins.
No, they celebrated April 6th, and we're not quite sure why, and I'm not sure they did either.
No, that's what it seems like. Some say this and some say that.
Yeah, it could be that it was Sam's birthday. It could be that it was the day that the Malon first flowered in the party field. Because we read in the party field, a beautiful young sapling leaped up. It had silver bark and long leaves and burst into golden flowers in April.
And Sam's birthday is April 6th, so that's certainly possible. So is the Elves' New Year, which is yet another reason that's given. So maybe it's all 3, though I have to admit, the Elves' New Year, I don't see the Hobbits.
That seems the least likely.
That seems the least likely reason. I mean, most of the Hobbits are like, why would I celebrate an Elves' New Year? I mean, we're also told that they observed November 2nd by blowing the horn of the mark in Buckland at sundown. That's the anniversary of this reading. Ted gaped, for at that moment he first caught sight of the escort that at a sign from Merry now marched over the bridge. Dashing back into the mill, he ran out with a horn and blew it loudly. "Save your breath," laughed Merry. "I've a better." Then lifting up his silver horn, he winded it, and its clear call rang over the hill, and out of the holes and sheds and shabby houses of Hobbiton, the Hobbits answered and came pouring out, and with cheers and loud cries, they followed the company up the road to Bag End. I love that they observe that.
Yes.
Not just the day of all of these things happening, but the moment of the horn blowing at sundown. That's fantastic.
Yep, the time. And we'll talk more about whether we should do that in light of the question in the
mailbag question, yeah.
The new reckoning in the final version differs dramatically from that in the draft.
Very dramatic. Too dramatically for us to talk at length about, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Indeed. As Christopher writes, in Appendix D, this elegantly balanced structure had been abandoned and replaced by a different system, somewhat obscurely recounted. The year had been divided into 5 seasons, 2 long seasons, summer and winter, 3 months each, and 3 short seasons, spring, autumn, and stirring, 2 months each.
I love that there's an additional season. The table recreated by Christopher in Peoples of Middle-earth is detailed and complex, but like he said, the final version got simplified, and we'll see about covering this in the postscript. If nothing else, the extra names, which include a whole slew of alternative names for the months that Tolkien came up with, are worth looking at. For now, though, we'll end with Christopher's concluding words from this section of Peoples of Middle-earth. I am inclined to think that my father was still developing and refining his theory of the calendars when the need to submit his text to the publishers became imperative and urgent. Of the final form, I believe that what I said of Appendix F, that had circumstances been otherwise, the form of that appendix would have been markedly different, can be repeated of Appendix D with greater force.
And I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to Appendix F as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Now, there is no record of the Bree folk commemorating either March 25th or September 22nd. But in the Prancing Pony, there grew up a custom of making holiday and dancing in the common room on April 6th. Some said it was Old Nob's birthday, some that it was the day on which Bill Ferny finally left town, and some that it was the day old Barliman finally remembered the mail. James, what does Barliman have for us tonight? Besides more terrible segues.
Well, we've got a great question that is entirely appropriate for this episode. Michael in California asks, besides Tolkien Reading Day on March 25th, which of course commemorates the destruction of the ring and the downfall of Barad-dûr, and Hobbit Day on September 22nd, which celebrates the shared birthdays of Bilbo and Frodo, what other Middle-earth dates or Tolkien dates are you aware of that people celebrate? And are there any you think we should celebrate?
Ooh, I like that second part of the question.
We've touched on some of them. Let's get into it a bit more.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the real ones first, the ones that people do celebrate. I think, I know you and I have done this, much of the Tolkien fandom does this. We celebrate Tolkien's birthday with a toast to the professor on January 3rd every year.
Yep.
I also often see memes pop up on social media around 10 o'clock in the morning, October the 24th, if you'd like to know.
Yes.
So Frodo waking up in Rivendell is a date and very specific time celebrated in the primary world. Are there any other ones that are actually observed, James? Those are the two that come to mind.
Yeah, I can't think of any others that I've seen in any big way. Of course, within things like Lotro festivals and stuff like that, as we've mentioned, correspond quite nicely to things. We get the Harvest Month, we get the Yule Festival and so on. But I'm not sure if any, I mean, I guess there are occasionally things that get done around Tolkien's death.
Yeah, commemorations or...
Yeah, commemorations. But let's get to the fun part. What dates should we observe?
Okay.
How do we celebrate things in the Sisto Reckoning?
In the Sisto Reckoning. I love that this is becoming a thing. We definitely celebrate King Elessar's coronation on May 1st.
Yep.
I think, because I absolutely love Theoden, I think we honor either... well, there's a part of me that thinks the Battle of the Pelennor should get its own thing. So let's do the funeral of Theoden. That would be August 10th.
Yep.
So those would be a couple that come to my mind.
Definitely. That's definitely up there in terms of the not celebration so much as commemoration.
Just like commemoration, right? Honoring. Yeah.
So we've already talked about the Hobbit celebrating April 6th.
Yeah. That'd be a date.
I mean, we would maybe pick the reason for it. Maybe we'd say it's because of the flowering of the Malorn tree in the party field. I've got to believe that the flowering of the Malorn tree in the party field might have some connection with the Elvish, it being a significant day for Elves
New Year.
As well.
I also think that Sam's birthday being that day is interesting.
Yeah, it's almost that combination of the two.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a great day to celebrate.
That would be a good one.
I mean, we have to work out whether we would actually celebrate April 6th or we would work out what the actual day would be.
Well, yeah, that's true. We have to change the calendar.
April 6th, I think, would be a wonderful day. On a more somber note, it's interesting that there are two dates that do get mentioned multiple times as anniversaries in the Tale of Years.
Yeah.
Frodo's poisoning by Shelob on March 13th.
Yeah, that gets mentioned at least twice, right?
Yeah, and of course, Frodo's piercing by the Morgul blade on October 6th. That's a very significant repeating anniversary in the Tale of Years. And so that's another possible thing that we could commemorate. Obviously, not necessarily celebrate, but commemorate.
No, that's a good point. On a shire note, I'll add that I think March 25th is still a great day to celebrate. I'm glad we celebrate it, but I think we should include it because it's the birthday of Eleanor the Fair.
Yes. I
mean, without her, we don't have the Red Book of Westmarch. She is the reason that this book gets beyond just Frodo and Sam and gets, copied and kept, and, the Fair Barons of Westmarch, the whole story there, not to mention the fact that my daughter's name is Eleanor. Anyway.
Exactly.
I also know that we kind of already have a holiday of sorts on December 25th. Some people might observe a holiday on that day, but that is the day the company leaves Rivendell on the quest. So that's another very relevant day to celebrate. But I think also March 15th comes to mind. That's the Battle of the Pelennor. Yeah. So many things connected with that. Yeah, Eowyn's defeat of the Witch King, Theoden's death, which then of course also means Éomer's ascent to the kingship. Mm-hmm. You've got you got Aragorn showing up, revealing the banner of kings for the first time in 1,000 years. There's so much stuff going on that day.
Yeah. Oh, we also mentioned November the 2nd.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The date of the Horn of Buck, or not the Horn of Buckland, the Mary's Horn, the Horn of Rohan that was given him, the Horn of the Mark.
I think that's the day I think we should be blowing a horn on that day.
Oh, heck yeah. That is a day to blow the horn for sure.
I think we should definitely do that. I mean, there's other things as well. June 25th, when Elisar finds the sapling of the White Tree.
Oh, yes.
Mid-Year's Day for the wedding of Elisar and Arwen.
Mm-hmm. Which is also observed in Lord of the Rings Online.
Yes.
Right? There's a special instance that you can go and be a part of. Mm-hmm.
There's September 29th, which is when the ring bearers depart the Grey Havens and the Third Age ended. That seems a pretty significant calendar day. What about primary world Tolkien-related dates? Any that we've missed?
I think it's high time that we do a toast to Christopher Tolkien on his birthday too. I mean,
absolutely. November 21st for everyone.
Yes, November 21st. I mean, we owe such a debt to Christopher in terms of the light that he's shown on his father's work and the works that we never would have seen without his efforts. So, and then let's be honest, the professor would not have had time to subcreate any of this without Edith holding down the home front. So maybe we ought to honor her birthday, which is January 21st, as a way of sort of like acknowledging, thank you for making it possible for him to do all this. Those would be those two that come to my mind.
Yeah, I guess there's, also potentially publication dates.
Which
tend to get announced on social media.
That's true. We see those on social media, yeah. Especially when they're anniversary dates, like 25 years ago or 50 years ago.
Exactly. There's also, we haven't talked at all about significant, other than Bilbo's birthday, significant dates in The Hobbit. And I think one of the reasons for that is
that's a good point.
They're a little more obscure. Tolkien didn't work out the dates.
Ooh, Durin's Day.
So Durin's Day is a really interesting one. Yeah.
When you mentioned Hobbit, that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of other dates, like the other thing that comes to mind worthy of celebration is that the death of Smaug.
Yeah.
But all we know about in the text is that the death of Smaug, if you work it out, takes place one day after Durin's Day. So you have to know what Durin's Day is to know the day. So that's interesting because the text just says the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter, right? So it's based on a lunar.
Yeah, which means it's going to change every year. But what?
Right. There are people that have tried to work it out. However, one of the things that came out in the second edition of Ratliff's History of the Hobbit was a note where Tolkien actually did explicitly say that Durin's Day is the 19th of October.
Okay.
At least
I love that we have that answer. Yeah.
So, and therefore
October 20th would be the death of Smaug.
October 20th, exactly. So anyway, Michael, I hope that was an interesting discussion. It seems like we've got a whole ton of
there's a holiday every week.
Yeah. we should put together, this should be incorporated in calendars.
In the Sisto reckoning.
We should hysterically.
I'm kidding about that.
I'm thinking like a calendar with
an actual wall calendar.
Like we could talk to Jeremy Edmonds or something about
where we combine both real world Tolkien things like publication dates or birth dates, death dates as well, but then also the important dates in Middle Earth.
Yeah, because there's a lot of them.
There are.
We should be celebrating Tolkien every week.
We could probably do it every day. I bet we could do a day by day tear off calendar.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
There's something cool.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do about that. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Join us next week, though, as the Sage of the South administers our placement exams for writing and spelling as we dive into Appendix E.
You may regret asking me to do that. But,
I doubt that, but I'm not putting it completely in the realm of the impossible.
I'm having fun putting things together.
I can't wait.
Okay, Alan and I want to thank the members of Team PPP, editor Jordan Rennells, Barlim and Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
Please take a minute to check out theprancingponypodcast.com. That's where you'll find show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get PPP merch featuring all the great episode artwork that Megan's been doing for the show since the start of season 7.
You'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, after all, a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you'll find a link for it in our library. We do get a small amount of compensation when you make your purchase, and we thank you for that.
Indeed, we do. We also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Zaksu in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Keith in Alabama, Erica in Texas, Vivian in California, and James in Massachusetts.
There's also Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen from Massachusetts, Olivia in London, Robert in Arizona, Nick in Wisconsin, Lewis in South Carolina, Thomas in Germany, Craig in California, Bailey in Texas, Kevin in Massachusetts, Julie in Washington, Bruce in California, Joe in Maryland, Nathan in Arizona, Kevin in Pennsylvania, Tom in Pennsylvania, and Jeff in Michigan. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed. Thank you.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, what calendar system you'll be using now to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
And if you want your voice literally heard, well, just send us audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us. Please be sure to still email the question to Barliman, though.
That's right. Now, even though Barliman's been a lot more reliable lately, there is still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
adopt the Sisto reckoning and may you rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill.